September 23rd, 1933. Early morning in New York City. Harlem was just waking up when the sound of engines broke the calm. 10 cars rolled slowly into the neighborhood. Inside those cars were 50 armed men. They were not police. They were not federal agents. They were Dutch Schultz's crew, hard men from the Bronx, known for violence, known for leaving blood behind when business went wrong. They had one clear order: take Harlem. Dutch Schultz, the Bronx beer baron, had decided the neighborhood was too valuable to leave alone. Harlem's numbers racket was one of the most profitable illegal businesses in New York. Millions of small bets every week, steady money, low risk, and Dutch wanted all of it. By 9 a.m., his men struck the First Policy Bank on 125th Street. 6 enforcers walked in like they owned the place. Collectors barely had time to look up before baseball bats smashed the counting tables. Money and slips flew across the floor. One of the men shouted, "You work for Dutch now. Anyone got a problem with that?" No one answered. At 10:30 a.m., another policy bank on 135th Street was hit the same way. Doors kicked open, men beaten, the message repeated. At 11:15 a.m., they hit a third location on Lenox Avenue. This time, one of Bumpy Johnson's trusted lieutenants was there, a man called Quick Lewis. He had worked with Bumpy for years and was not easily scared. Quick raised his hands and tried to talk. "You're making a mistake," he said. A thick-necked enforcer stepped forward and hit him across the face with a blackjack. Blood spilled onto the floor. "No mistake," the man said. "Tell Bumpy Johnson his time is up. He's got 24 hours to negotiate, or we take everything." Quick stumbled into the street and headed straight for Small's Paradise. By noon, the news reached Bumpy Johnson. He was sitting inside Small's Paradise when Quick burst through the door, bleeding and shaken. One look told Bumpy everything. "How many?" Bumpy asked calmly. 50, maybe more. They're everywhere." Bumpy looked around the room. 15 men, loyal men, tough men. But 15 against 50 was not a fight. It was suicide. Sitting at the bar was Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of numbers. She had built the Harlem number system before Bumpy ever became its enforcer. She listened quietly, then stood up. "I'm calling Lucky Luciano," she said. Bumpy frowned. "He's Italian. He's with them." She shook her head. "Lucky understands business, and Dutch just broke every rule." She went to the phone in the back. At the Claridge Hotel downtown, Lucky Luciano was in a meeting when his secretary interrupted him. "There's a woman on the line," she said. "She says it's urgent. Stephanie St. Clair." Lucky knew the name immediately. He picked up the phone. Madame St. Clair spoke clearly. "Mr. Luciano, Dutch Schultz invaded Harlem this morning with 50 men. He's taking our operations by force." Lucky listened. "If this continues," she said, "there will be gunfire. Civilians will get hurt, police will come, and then the government will come. Are you going to control your people, or are we going to have a war that burns this city down?" Lucky stayed silent for a moment. He had not approved this. Dutch had acted alone. That angered him more than anything else. "Where is Bumpy Johnson?" Lucky asked. "Small's Paradise," she replied, "waiting." "I'll handle it," Lucky said. He hung up and turned to Meyer Lansky. "Get Dutch on the phone." 20 minutes later, Dutch Schultz answered, sounding pleased. "Lucky, I'm solving our Harlem problem." Lucky's voice was cold. "Pull your men out, now." Dutch laughed. "I'm taking Harlem. This is business." "No, this is chaos, and I didn't approve it." Dutch's voice rose. "You're protecting a black gangster over me?" "I'm protecting the commission. You start a war in Harlem, we all lose." Silence. "Pull out, or the families will deal with you." Dutch breathed hard. He was furious, but he understood the math. By 4 p.m., Dutch's men started leaving Harlem. They didn't announce it, they just left. At Small's Paradise, Bumpy Johnson received the news quietly. He nodded once. 2 days later, Lucky and Bumpy met at a neutral restaurant. No guns, no guards. Lucky spoke first. "You run Harlem." September 24th, 1933. The morning after Dutch Schultz's men pulled out of Harlem, the neighborhood felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just alert. People stood in doorways a little longer than usual. Numbers runners talked in lower voices. Everyone knew something big had almost happened, and everyone knew it had stopped just in time. Bumpy Johnson did not celebrate. He did not throw a party or make speeches. He understood how close Harlem had come to a full-scale war. 50 armed men moving freely through the streets was not just a threat to business, it was a threat to lives. Children, shopkeepers, ordinary people who had nothing to do with gang politics. Bumpy walked the neighborhood that day, slowly, calmly, shaking hands, listening. People nodded at him with respect. To them, Bumpy was not just a gangster, he was a man who stood between Harlem and chaos. Behind the scenes, however, the situation was still dangerous. Dutch Schultz was furious. Back in the Bronx, he paced his office, yelling at anyone who came near him. In his mind, he had been robbed, not just of Harlem's money, but of his reputation. He believed fear was power, and being forced to retreat made him look weak. "You don't pull out after taking territory," Dutch shouted. "That makes you a joke." His lieutenants tried to calm him. They reminded him that Lucky Luciano was not someone you challenged lightly, that the commission existed for a reason, that starting a war with 5 families would end badly. Dutch did not care. To him, Lucky had crossed a line. He saw Lucky's decision as betrayal, an Italian boss choosing a black gangster over him. In Dutch's mind, that was unforgivable. But Lucky Luciano did not lose sleep over Dutch's anger. Lucky was thinking bigger. He had built the commission to stop exactly this kind of reckless violence. He had watched too many gang wars destroy profits and bring police attention. Harlem was a powder keg, dense population, newspapers watching closely, racial tension already high. A war there would have been disastrous. And there was something else. Lucky respected Bumpy Johnson, not because of race, not because of sentiment, but because of competence. Bumpy ran a disciplined operation. He kept his men in line. He paid on time. He avoided unnecessary violence. And most importantly, he understood boundaries. That mattered to Lucky. A few days after the Harlem invasion ended, Lucky called a quiet meeting with Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello. "Dutch is unstable," Lucky said. "He's acting without permission." Meyer nodded. "He's been like that for a while." Costello added, "He thinks intimidation solves everything." Lucky leaned back. "That kind of thinking brings heat." They all understood what that meant. In the underworld, heat was death. Over the next year, Dutch Schultz became more reckless. Prohibition was ending. His bootlegging empire, the source of most of his wealth, was about to disappear. Instead of adjusting calmly, Dutch panicked. He doubled down on numbers rackets, extortion, anything that could replace his lost income. But he did it badly. He bullied instead of negotiated. He threatened instead of persuaded. He ignored the commission instead of working through it. He also made a mistake far bigger than Harlem. He decided to target a prosecutor, Thomas Dewey. Dewey was young, ambitious, and determined to clean up organized crime in New York. He was building cases carefully, flipping witnesses, following money, and Dutch Schultz was directly in his sights. Dutch believed the old rules still applied. If a prosecutor caused trouble, you scared him. If that didn't work, you bribed him. If that didn't work, you removed him. Dutch wanted Dewey dead. In 1935, he brought the idea to the commission. Lucky said no. Killing a prosecutor would bring federal attention like nothing before. It would not just hurt Dutch, it would destroy everyone. Dutch lost his temper. At a commission meeting in October 1935, Dutch Schultz pulled a gun on Lucky Luciano in front of everyone. It was the ultimate insult, the ultimate threat, the ultimate mistake. Lucky did not flinch. He talked Dutch down calmly. He explained the consequences. He reminded Dutch that no one man was bigger than the system. Dutch lowered the gun, but the damage was done. The commission now saw Dutch as a danger, not just to rivals, to everyone. A week later, Dutch Schultz was shot in a Newark chop house. 3 bullets, slow death, no mercy. The commission never officially claimed responsibility. They did not need to. Everyone understood. Dutch Schultz had crossed too many lines. As for Bumpy Johnson, he watched these events from Harlem with a quiet understanding. He never said, "I told you so." He did not need to. He continued running Harlem for decades. Numbers, protection, quiet control. He avoided unnecessary wars. When pressure came from outside, he handled it carefully, often through negotiation rather than violence. Bumpy remembered the lesson Lucky had taught him in 1933. Power was not about how many guns you had. It was about knowing when not to use them. The alliance between Lucky Luciano and Bumpy Johnson was never written on paper. It was never announced, but it existed. An understanding. Harlem would be left alone, and in return, Harlem would not become a problem. For Lucky, it was one of the smartest decisions he ever made. For Bumpy, it was survival. And for Dutch Schultz, it was the beginning of the end. October 1935. 2 years had passed since the day Dutch Schultz's men rolled into Harlem and then quietly rolled back out. On the surface, that incident felt distant, almost forgotten. But under the surface, it had changed everything. For Lucky Luciano, that day confirmed something he already believed. Organized crime could not survive on fear alone. It needed rules, it needed balance, and it needed leaders who understood when to stop. For Bumpy Johnson, that day marked the moment Harlem truly became untouchable. And for Dutch, it planted a bitterness that never left him. After the Harlem incident, Dutch grew more isolated. Other bosses stopped trusting him. Meetings became tense. Conversations ended early when he entered the room. He noticed it, and it fed his anger. Dutch believed the world was turning against him. Prohibition officially ended in December 1933, just months after Harlem. Overnight, Dutch lost the foundation of his empire. Legal alcohol destroyed the black market profits he had relied on for years. While other bosses transitioned calmly into new rackets, Dutch reacted emotionally. He leaned harder into numbers. He leaned harder into threats. He leaned harder into violence. And violence brought attention. By 1934 and 1935, prosecutor Thomas Dewey was building cases against organized crime figures across New York. Dewey was different from other prosecutors. He could not be bribed. He could not be intimidated. He worked slowly and carefully, flipping insiders, collecting documents, and building airtight cases. Dutch Schultz was at the top of Dewey's list. Dutch panicked. To him, prison was a death sentence. He had seen what happened to men like him behind bars. He decided the problem had to be removed. So he went to the commission with a proposal that shocked even hardened gangsters. He wanted Dewey dead. Lucky Luciano. The commission could not allow a man like that to remain alive, not because of revenge, but because of survival. A leader who threatened the system itself was a liability no organization could afford. On October 23, 1935, Dutch Schultz was shot in a Newark chop house. He did not die quickly. He suffered for hours, delirious, speaking nonsense as doctors tried and failed to save him. He died screaming. No official statement was ever made. None was needed. Everyone understood the reason. Dutch Schultz had crossed every line. Lucky Luciano continued forward, but even he could not escape the pressure forever. In 1936, Thomas Dewey successfully prosecuted Lucky on prostitution charges. It was ironic. The man who had reorganized crime to avoid chaos was taken down by a racket he barely managed directly. Lucky went to prison. But even from behind bars, his system held. The commission survived. The families adapted. The structure remained intact. And Harlem stayed independent. Bumpy Johnson continued to rule Harlem for decades. He ran numbers, kept order, and protected his territory with a mix of intelligence and restraint. Outsiders learned that Harlem was not a place to invade. It was a place to negotiate. When asked years later how he survived when so many others did not, Bumpy gave a simple answer: because I knew when to fight and when to let smarter men handle it. That smarter man in 1933 had been Lucky Luciano. Lucky's decision to stop Dutch in Harlem was not about race. It was not about friendship. It was about vision. He saw that allowing Dutch to conquer Harlem would lead to endless war, endless heat, and the destruction of everything they had built. By choosing restraint, Lucky preserved the system. By respecting that decision, Bumpy preserved his kingdom. And by ignoring both, Dutch Schultz sealed his fate. The story of September 23, 1933 is remembered not because of the violence that happened, but because of the violence that didn't. 50 armed men entered Harlem ready for war, and because one man made a phone call, they left without firing a single shot. That is real power. Not domination, not intimidation, but knowing when to stop. Lucky understood that. Dutch Schultz never did.